Welcome to Politics Between the Lines. Wow. Today we're going to do the debate post-game play-by-play breakdown because that was an absolute beatdown. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. So we're going to break it down. We're going to talk about how it happened. We're going to talk about the strategies going into it from what we know. And we'll talk about why it was such an incredible beatdown, because it was. There's just no way around it. He lost, and he lost so badly that I think that it will have an effect on the race. And more importantly, I think instead of this debate having an effect on the race, I think that it's much more reminiscent to the last debate, which we all looked at it and thought of it as if it had an effect on the race, but really what it was it revealed to us the state of the race. So, in other words, Biden couldn't survive. That he was never going to survive that debate. But even if that debate hadn't happened, knowing what we now know, seeing what we saw, he wasn't going to survive anyway. There was no way. There was no way. This guy was too old, too incoherent. There was simply no way, and the debate is what let us know that. And that's what I think this debate, the significance that it has. This is going to be a two-part. We're going to go through post-analysis. Unfortunately, I don't think it's Kamala having destroyed Trump. It's Trump destroying himself. But on the other hand, Kamala did something that no one has ever been able to figure out how to do against Trump. And so I do want to talk about what she did, what the sort of 5 key plays were, and how we could see that work out. But the real meat of it is going to be Donald Trump. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing I want to point out is preparation. And this is going to be point number 1 for Donald Trump as well as Kamala. But we're going to talk about Kamala first. The amount of preparation that Kamala did was obvious right off the bat. I mean, immediately. The first question she gets is a devastating question.
Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
The question is essentially, Donald Trump's been out there telling his people, are you better than you were 4 years ago under me? It's a yes or no question, technically. Yes, I think people are better off than they were 4 years ago, or no, I don't think people are better off 4 years ago. Obviously, she can't answer either way. If she says yes, then the 50% of Americans who don't agree want to scream, fuck you. And if she says no, that's an indictment against her and Biden, which is exactly why Trump brings it up. So there's no question that she can't answer it. She has to just pivot into something. And this is where her preparation becomes really obvious, because I'm going to play this clip at 1.5 times speed and take a listen.
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
Okay. So, it's a good answer. You got to dodge the question somehow. You got to talk about the economy. You got to try and, this is their Achilles heel. This is their kryptonite. This is Donald Trump's, it's not his favorite topic, but it's the one that is registering with voters. So it's the question that she's the most afraid of. It's been worded in a way that she can't answer it. So she has to kind of word salad to get around answering the question definitively. And, you know, it turned out pretty good. But if we listen to it in normal speed.
Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is...
You can see why her prep work was so important, because she's nervous as fuck. She's got dry mouth. She's not breathing very well. You can see she runs out of breath at the wrong times and then has to kind of go like this. You know, it doesn't matter. You can tell that she's been prepared and she has this in the can. It might not come out great, but it's ready. It's ready to go, and it answers the most devastating question that she was probably expecting. Like, at some point, she was going to have to answer on the fact that the economy is not raging. People are not happy about it. The inflation hurt people, and that was on her watch. Second factor that made a huge difference that Kamala was able to do and nobody else has ever been able to do. She did not fact check Trump. I'm not saying she never did, but let's listen real quick. We're not really going to listen to Trump's responses very much now because we're going to spend more time on him. But let's listen to his response, and I'm going to play it double fast. And we'll just, you know, in your head, keep track of how many things that you'd be thinking, wait, that's not really true, or that's completely false, or that doesn't even make sense. Think about how many there were in the 2-minute response that he gives to this.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because it was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into...
Okay, so what do you go after? How many different things can you possibly imagine that you're going to try and fact check him on? He just said so many things that were either misleading, lying, or I don't even know what to make of the whole tariffs thing. I don't even know if I would call that a lie. I think I would just say that Trump's stupid. But how do you defend that? What do you do? Well, I'll tell you what every other politician has ever done is they jumped right in the mud and they started flinging it back and they just got it all over the place. She doesn't do any of that. She just starts her narrative. She's got a job to do. She's prepared. She's got these responses in the bank and practicing them. Why not use one? All right, now this brings us to the big one. If you accept that preparation matters, and I think that it does, I think we can see that it does. She was rattled in the beginning, got a bad question, handled it fine. She had an answer in the tank, ready to go. She had practiced it. She could execute it. Secondly, she decides not to chase down all of Trump's lies, falsehoods, or just ignorant, weird things. Because she decides not to run down that rabbit hole, she is free to just make her new point, and she's free to bait him in it. And the first bait that she lays that's really obvious, it's actually not that good. She kind of botches it, I think. Let's listen to this.
And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Okay, so the question that she gets, this is her answer where she baits him, and everything changes. Once she starts baiting him, the whole thing, I mean, the fucking wheels come off the bus for Trump. All kinds of crazy shit starts happening. And it's all because she has the prep work, so she's not too rattled. She chooses not to follow him down the fact-checking rabbit hole. So she can do whatever she wants. She now is in control of the debate. If you're not following him around, if you're not trying to keep a lid on the shit that's spewing out of this shit show, then you're free to do whatever you want. And So she gets a question about immigration. Now, this is her second worst issue. Let's just take a listen.
But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
Okay. So we're actually going to spend more time on this. We'll go into a little bit more detail about how she does the bait and how Trump ends up taking it. Because I actually think that it's so much worse than what people think. But for now, let's just move on to number 4. And this one is another one that's, I don't think many people notice this. If you were watching the debate, you may have picked up on the fact that Trump got the final word in almost every time.
Vice President Harris.
Excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader.
President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of the.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized. Not.
Go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term. And
Who would eat you for lunch?
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier. And I'll give you a minute here.
Personal flattery.
You talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
said Trump did the most amazing thing.
Not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive.
So both parties negotiate with the network, ABC, about the rules of the debate. And they had actually been negotiated under Biden, but when he drops out, Harris's team wants to get the mics turned back on. Biden's team negotiated that they would have them turned off. They would be super moderated, 2 minutes each, because they thought that that was beneficial to them. Harris's team decides that that's not what they want. They want Trump to be able to go on and make a fool out of himself, essentially. The Trump campaign says, no, we're not doing that. We're sticking to the Biden rules. But you have to remember that ABC is negotiating with them. So we're hearing it from the campaigns, but we also know that they're negotiating with ABC because ABC doesn't give a shit. They're like, dude, we're running the debate. How do you guys want to do it? Do you want mics on? Do you want mics off? So the Harris campaign wants them off, wants them turned on, The Trump campaign decides that they want the Biden format. They want them turned off, which sort of looks weak. And in the end, what we hear ABC kind of come out and say is that we'll use prudence. And what that means is that both campaigns did agree to that. My guess is that the Trump campaign wanted the microphones off because they knew that he could not control himself. The Harris campaign wants them on for the exact same reason. And so in the end, as ABC is trying to negotiate this, it's out in the public. The Trump campaign doesn't necessarily want to be known as the people who are obviously trying to corral their man because he can't keep his stupid mouth shut. So they end up basically agreeing that the moderators can be the ones to decide. They have a button to turn it off, but as long as things are civil and it can keep going a little bit. So if you watch the debate, you will have noticed that Trump gets an additional minute to go on and explain more or a rebuttal. Trump gets a large amount more time than she does, and it's mostly because they let him have all these rebuttals. And if you've watched any previous debates, when have you ever seen a debate where one party is getting a lot more airtime and the other party is not bitching about it? I've never seen that. I've never even heard of it. Everybody complains that they gave the other team more airtime, that they took up more time. Now, because the Harris campaign has been talking to ABC and telling them, well, we're okay with this and this and this is what we'd like to see. And the Trump campaign is coming in saying, well, we want to see this and this and this. And they eventually get themselves to a place where they both agree. ABC's gone back and forth. Now, in that process, ABC knows that the Harris campaign has given them wide latitude. I mean, think about it. They've been talking to them. They've been trying to talk to the Harris people, then they talk to the Trump people, then they go back to the Harris people, then they go back to the Trump people. This took place over like 3 weeks. The ABC team knew that the Harris campaign was okay with them letting Trump run. They didn't have to say anything. She didn't say anything in the debate. There was no wink or nod. It's just that ABC knew that they were not going to hear a whole bunch of grievance from the Harris campaign. They're not going to try and give them a black eye if they let Trump just run away and hang himself. And that is the fourth key element that I think most people may not have realized. That was done ahead of time. Again, there's no collusion. It's just that the Harris campaign made sure that ABC knew that they're okay with it. That's the inevitable outcome, because the ABC campaign would have said, well, okay, so you're okay with the mics being on the whole time, but what if Trump runs away with it? You do realize that we can't really stop him unless we can turn off his mic. And the Harris campaign's answer would have been, that's okay. We think he's going to make a huge noose and just hang himself. That was a big deal because he did. They let him go again and again and again. And we'll get into it a little bit more. But for the point that I want to make on the Harris side, that was strategic. They knew that that was the goal that they wanted, and they made it clear to ABC that it was fine with them if they let it roll. So ABC does. If Trump is asking for more time and they know that the Harris campaign is not going to bitch about it, well, okay, give it to the guy who wants the time. Both candidates seem to be okay with Trump running his mouth and fucking himself. Then we're not going to stop it. It's not our job to tell him how to run a campaign and do a debate, right? So the fifth thing that I want to mention, and this one I'm not even going to talk about it all until we get to the Trump side, is that Harris took the middle. If you watch that debate and ask yourself the question, which of those candidates is the conservative candidate? And I mean conservative with a lowercase c. The answer was Harris. She was able to position herself in the middle on issue after issue after issue. And we'll talk about that a lot more, why she was able to do that and how Trump utterly lost this for this reason. Probably the most devastating. There's going to be zingers and one-liners, but in my opinion, this was the reason that Donald Trump lost and can't recover. It's this. It's the fact that he cannot reclaim the middle, both by his personality and by his lack of discipline and lack of knowledge. But all these things wrapped up meant that in the end, she owns the middle. You can vote for a fringe candidate or you can vote for a centrist, which is remarkable because 4 years ago, she was not a centrist, at least in most people's eyes. Okay, moving on to Donald Trump. Item number 1, he did not prepare. Maybe he can't prepare. I don't know. He either didn't prepare or he can't prepare or he did prepare and he's a complete idiot. One of those things. Whatever the reason is, he did not prepare. He was not prepared. And so let's go back to, remember, her first question we used as an example of why preparation was so important. She's very, very nervous. She's got dry mouth. She's not breathing very well, so she keeps hitching whenever she has to change emotional tacks from logic that just flows to, and I'm gonna inject a little personality. You can see her get caught every time. It's not great, but yet it comes off just fine. It's fine. It's acceptable. People know it's a debate. They know you're nervous. That was an excellent answer. Dodge the question masterfully. Whatever. Everyone has a different opinion, but it wasn't a disaster. And in fact, in some ways, you could say that it was a marvelous answer because she took what should have been a negative. She should have lost 2 points and came out neutral, is what I would say. When I was watching it, that's what I thought. Well, that worked. No damage. That was your worst question. It was your worst question. They came down and they were at the 1 yard line and you kept them to a field goal. Like, that's what that question was. But now they get the ball and it's their best question. This is it. In fact, it came from his rallies. The question that they asked Kamala was, is Trump right? Are people better off or worse than they were 4 years ago? Because he's saying that in his rally. So Trump now gets to respond essentially to the same question, and listen to what he does.
Well, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because it was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They've taken in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums.
Okay, so Trump gets the same question. And he does okay with it. I mean, he's winging it. He doesn't need to be prepared necessarily for this. But here's where his preparation, where the lack of preparation starts to kill him. He makes it 1 minute in, 1 minute on his best question, the one that people care about. It's his best question. And he spends 1 minute on it before he gets sidetracked because he loves the other things so much. Now, he's not rattled yet at this point. So he does turn it around at the very end after he rants about immigrants and how they're taking over whole towns and their militias coming in, all kinds of crazy shit. Turns it around at the last 5 seconds and says something about the economy. We're going to make it way better, whatever. So he hasn't lost his shit yet, but he can't control himself. He can't take the opportunities that are given him. when I was watching the debate the first time, I remember thinking, okay, Kamala made it through. That's okay. Not looking that great, but now Trump's going to come back. We'll see what he does. And that 1 minute mark when he just flared off, I was like, wait a minute, why would you abandon your absolute best issue? Why wouldn't you hammer this thing again and again and again? But he can't. He just wants to talk about something else and he's not prepared. All right. Item number 2, he took the bait. Now let's go back and look at the first trap that Kamala laid, because she didn't even do a very good job of it. At this point, she's still pretty nervous. It happens at about the 30-minute mark. So 30 minutes in, I want to look at what she fucked up about it. This was obviously planned as well. She wanted to lay this little trap. I'm sure they had a dozen of them, but this was the opportunity. She decided to take it. It was pretty clearly rehearsed, because you can see how she kind of fucks it up a little bit by not having it slide the way she wanted it to. But what's amazing, all that means is that the trap is so obvious. Even Trump should have seen this, and I'm sure he does. Well, I don't think he does. We'll watch this.
Why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminals.
Okay, so she starts out and she's essentially in defense because this is their second worst issue. Trump's been hammering immigration. Whether or not you think it's a problem, it is their second worst issue. So she's worried about it. She comes out on defense, and then immediately she twists it and tells the story about how Trump killed the immigration bill that was largely a Republican bill.
You know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
And then she tries to bait him.
And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you.
So she accuses him of being the problem. Now, this is why the bait works so well. She comes out and says something that he can easily defend. He could easily just say, it was a terrible bill. We killed it because it didn't do enough. You guys are stalling on the issue. You're trying to get immigrants in because you want to take over our cities. You want to, whatever, word salad it however you want to. But that's an easy answer for him. He can simply say, no, I didn't do that. Your bill sucked and I killed it because we need better. You need to do better. You guys suck. You're killing us, whatever. But she follows it with the bait. And it's so obvious. And he doesn't care. He just wants to take the bait. If you're watching that, you can tell that what she's trying to do is pin the immigration problem on him. She's blaming him. And she's going to follow it up by saying, he doesn't care about you. But somehow in there, she needs to work in the fact that his rallies suck, because she knows that's going to rile him up. But that doesn't really fit the narrative. The main argument that she wants to get across is that we are not the problem on immigration. This is actually a problem that he has created, and we will try and fix it. And she's going to support that by saying this is a thing that he does. He doesn't care about you. He cares about there being a dystopian future so that you rely on him to solve these problems, which he has partly created. The problem with that is, how do you get in, oh, and by the way, his campaigns suck and they're boring and his people don't even like him. How do you get that in there? That's really petty. It makes you look bad. That's the definition of getting into the mud with him, and you know that you'll lose. She's already shown discipline on that. She's not taking his bait. So how does she do that? You can see, and that's why I say that this was so obvious, is because she doesn't really do it very well. It doesn't flow. Listen to this.
About is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
While she's doing that part about his rallies, you can also tell that she's uncomfortable with this because she hitches when she starts talking about Hannibal Lecter. She runs out of air. The way it was supposed to be was, this is the point I'm trying to make, is that at his campaign rallies, he talks about all kinds of crazy shit, but he never talks about you. Oh, and stick in there, and by the way, they're boring as fuck. That's the way it was supposed to come off. But instead it comes off, He talks about all kinds of crazy things and his campaigns suck. Oh, and by the way, the thing is he doesn't talk about you. So it ends up getting switched, which makes it very, very obvious that this is a trap. She's just attacked him by saying that you're actually the problem with immigration. This issue that you keep harping on, you're the reason that it's happening, and we want to fix it and you don't. He needs to attack that. But she also throws in that little trap. So then the moderator comes in to redirect, give him the time back, and he says, I want to let you respond, but specifically, why did you kill that bill? I mean, that's now 2 times that he's been accused of being the problem behind immigration.
So why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border?
First, let me respond as to
The obvious thing that Trump needs to do is say, either I didn't kill it, that's just false, or I killed it because it was a terrible bill. Now let me talk about my rallies. But he can't. In fact, he doesn't even try to address it. He goes right. He doesn't even let the moderator finish the redirect because he's jumping at the opportunity to talk about his rallies and defend himself. So when you listen to Trump's response, this is it. This is where the wheels fucking come off.
Put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go,
First of all, he spends 30 seconds, maybe a minute, talking about his rallies and then finally coming back, never addressing the fact that he did kill the border bill. He is probably the reason, according to 2 people who he hasn't bothered to say that's not true. He realizes that he's missed it. He needs to start yelling, and he does. He starts talking. This is when the dogs getting eaten comes out. It's where the wheels just fall off because he doesn't have the ability to not take the bait.
to go into another subject, what they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
And then he realizes that he's losing it, and so he retreats. And that's the third thing. He retreats to the safety of what he has known before. Where does he know it? He knows it from his inner circle. He knows it because he's insulated himself, knows what gets his base. But this isn't about the base. You're trying to win an election. You're not just trying to control the Republican Party. He's already done that. He owns the Republican Party. So let's go back to Kamala. When I said that she took the middle, but I didn't really want to talk about it much. That's because she was only able to take the middle because he retreated. He retreated to the dark corners of MAGA, where he knows what he says riles people up.
They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States. And because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country.
This country, but
Excuse me, the FBI defrauded. They were defrauding statements. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is oil will be dead. Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly on Charlottesville. That story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you.
Let me just tell you about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men. They call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a... If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. They respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin. Hasn't spoken to anybody. Getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president?
President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
She has
we
a
do have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things,
So just yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it between him and his son. They get all this money from Ukraine. We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world.
So he knows that if he talks about Haitians eating dogs and, windmills giving people cancer or whatever else weird shit he says at his rallies, he knows that that totally works with those people. And he can't help but retreat back to that area, that safe place where people love him and people adore him. And because of that, Kamala is able to move into the middle. And for the rest of the debate, she is in the middle. She is now the centrist candidate because he abandoned it. The minute that he started to feel insecure, he retreated back to the people he loves and he retreated to telling them what they want to hear. When he retreats to safety, he also retreats to a place of fealty. What does that mean? I don't really know how to explain it better than this. When you have a cult, when you have irrational loyalty, let's just call it that. I don't know how else to describe it. You have a group of people that are sacrificing for you. When he begins to retreat, he does a second thing, which is that he begins to demand fealty. And you'll see this in, why was he attacking the governor of Georgia? A couple months ago, he starts attacking the governor of Georgia, I think named Brian Kemp, popular governor, Republican, supports Trump, still supports Trump. Trump even goes so far as to attack his wife in a really weird way. He starts talking about how she used to call him dear sir, and you helped us so much, and now they're being disloyal. I mean, it was weird shit, right? This is what Trump does when he feels threatened. He retreats back to the safety of his base, and he begins to challenge people who don't agree with him because he wants to know that the people closest to him are loyal to him no matter what. The only way to do that is to begin to throw things out where if you still support Trump, you have to choose between what you believe and your support of Trump. And he does this again on the abortion issue. It works perfectly fine if it is in fact true that all of your enemy has that view. But if you're saying things where about half of your own supporters disagree, then you're putting them in a place where they have to choose between two things that they love. Some of them will choose you and your base becomes stronger but smaller. That's the fourth thing that happened all night long. Watch it now.
Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states. We've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states. And
now, in conclusion, I realized that we did not talk about almost any of the zingers. There were none of the great moments of the debate have made it into this video. Probably for a good reason. I mean, I think that the trap was masterful, even though she fucked it up. They had to have known that it was going to work. It was worth trying to stick this weird comment about his rally size in an argument about immigration, the economy, and you're going to squeeze in there that is, that's tough. That's tough. Didn't really land, but it didn't matter because he took it anyway. And that's the key that I took from this whole debate. That's the most important revelation to me. It's not that Donald Trump did bad. I assumed that he was going to do bad. Whether she would crawl down into the mud with him was pretty much my only question. That was it. But the magnitude to which Donald Trump cannot control himself, had zero preparation, couldn't help but taking any bait that she gave him, and she does it again and again and again. We could go into all the times when she baited him after that, but I wanted to point out that one because it was obvious that it was a strategy. You could tell it was a strategy because the argument didn't really flow. She didn't like the way it flowed because she couldn't even deliver it very well. It doesn't land. It even fucks up the ending of the whole spiel. So she blows an entire opportunity to hit him with something, but it was worth it because he can't stop. He then retreats to safety, and any time that he feels threatened, he starts to demand the fealty of those around him. And those around him, in this case, are his entire base. He begins to demand that they say that they wanted Roe v. Wade out. In conversations all over the country, for people who mildly support him or on the fence, we love to talk about how Trump supporters do not talk to non-Trump supporters and vice versa. But that's not true. There's all kinds of people in the middle. There's all kinds of people. The very far right probably does not talk to the very far left. That is a fact. But I talk to people all the time. I'm totally in the middle. I absolutely think Trump is an idiot. I absolutely think that he's the dumbest fucker we've ever had in office. And we've had some doozies. But I'm still in the middle. And I'm happy to talk to Trump people. I do it all the time. I'm happy to talk to liberals. I do it all the time. I see these conversations all the time. There's no question that there are people now who have to choose between their love for what they believe in and their love for their dear leader. Some of them will choose the leader, and they're more powerful because of it. His grip on the party is now more strong because he did that. His ability to pull in votes from the middle, from the mass of people, that is weaker. And that will continue. That's what I think that the second debate showed us. That's why I think that this debate won't change anything, and yet it changed everything. Because it showed us, it's very similar to the first debate. Biden did not lose because of that debate. Biden lost because he was too old to win, and we found out about it in the debate. That's what we saw 2 nights ago.